Hey riders, welcome to another video in our adventure motorcycle review series. I'm Eric Lange with Ride Adventures, and I've been riding and guiding motorcycle tours around the world and creating our touring and renting operations since 2008. In today's video, and in our traditional pros versus cons format, I'm going to answer the question about whether the Harley Davidson Pan America is the right adventure bike for you. So I'm glad I've had the chance to ride the new Pan America, and I've had it out on beautiful pavement twisties, through canyon walls, long sweepers and switchbacks here in Central Oregon. I've also had the chance to get it out here in the dirt and see how it holds up in the rocks and the ruts and the dirt and the gravel. I've done some hill climbs, and yes, I've even had a chance to test how the crash bars hold up when there was the one moment that I dropped it. Anyway, with all that in mind, and with again going through the pros and the cons of this bike, I think I can really help you decide if it's the right adventure bike for you. And in the end, I want to share some thoughts directly with you, Harley Davidson. You've entered into the adventure bike market now. You've done a great job so far. I want to help you think through the next steps and how you can get further into this market and really start to take over it. So let's go. For starters, let me explain that this is the Pan America 1250 Special. There's a standard version as well, a little less expensive, but this is the special version with all the bells and whistles, some really great features that I'll go ahead and explain as we go on here. The first pro that I'd like to mention about this bike is the Revolution Max V-twin engine that Harley puts as the heart and soul of this bike. What a great engine, a great power spread for you. So like 45-degree V-twins, I wouldn't have thought that this 60-degree was going to do real well in those lower revs, but it's got great power, that great grunt down low, all the way up through 9,000 revs per minute. Puts out 150 horsepower, 94 foot-pounds of torque, has a slight bump in that power curve around the mid 6,000 range, but again, a really great smooth power throughout the rev range. Part of how Harley was able to accomplish this smooth power, especially down low, is by having a variable valve timing module set basically between the crankshaft and the upper cam assembly. So something they put in a patent for, but again, it's a feature that allows engines to really breathe well and aspirate and do well throughout the entire rev range. And another reason why 1252 cc's is able to put out 150 horsepower is because they've actually pumped this up real tight with a 13-to-1 compression ratio. A little bit later in the pros, I'm going to talk about the possible con that goes with that compression ratio. But on the front end, looking good and running right, 13-to-1 is getting near Formula One types of compression ratios, and it really makes for a lot of power and a lot of excitement when you twist that throttle. The Revolution Max V-twin engine comes with hydraulic valves, so there won't be any adjustments needed. You're not going to need to check your valves with regular intervals to see the clearances. The last thing I'll mention about this great Revolution Max V-twin is that Harley included a rev limiter to 4,000 RPMs when you're in neutral. Don't worry though, Harley riders, you're still going to be able to check and make sure that your engine is running by revving just a little less than half the piss out of it. All that power is pumping out of those two cylinders and funneled into a single exhaust here on the right side. I'm glad Harley made this sound a little more like an adventure bike too. We didn't need to hear the loud crack of the 45-degree V-twins. We don't need to be out there as adventure riders introducing ourselves and our motorcycles to the tiniest villages and the smallest communities in the world by having such a loud engine. It's an appropriate sound and note coming out of this thing. Of course, aftermarket exhaust options will be available. And of course, you'll see I've got the scratches on this one from when I put it down. But again, nice job making a good sounding bike appropriate for the type of riding we're doing. That 150 horsepower is being driven to the rear wheel through a standard 6-speed transmission, 1 down, 5 up, and it's indicated clearly on the dashboard what gear you're in. I didn't have any major problems shifting. Everything works smoothly. A couple of missed shifts were actually my fault. Going from neutral to first is a little bit of a heavy clunk, but that's kind of true with a lot of transmissions out there on the market. So nice job with this one. It actually doesn't come with any kind of an auto blipper or a quick shifting feature where the computer and the engine are helping to work together to match revolutions per minute to the speed that you're going and the gear that you're going into. It's actually got to be done manually, but that's part of the fun of motorcycle riding, I think, is to get into that rhythm, get into the flow, and be able to do those things yourself instead of waiting for a computer to do it for you. So the suspension on the Pan America 1250 Special is very well thought out and puts it in the luxury category of adventure bikes, if I may. Up front, you've got 47mm inverted Showa forks, and all around you've got their semi-active front and rear suspension with vehicle load control. What that means is between the computer and the suspension componentry, the position of the rear swing arm, the position of your throttle, your lean angles, and all the different things that are going on while you're riding, this is going to adapt to your riding conditions and give you the perfect ride, the right geometry. Again, considering what kind of a load you have, whether you have a passenger or luggage with you, this is a system that works together to keep your bike's geometry where it should be for the best riding and handling and performance. Another feature they've included on the 1250 Special is called adaptive ride height. And that means that when you pull up to a stoplight or a stop sign, the bike is actually going to lower 1 to 2 inches, depending on your settings for you. It's going to lower to make it easier to get a good flat foot, firm foot on the ground. Those of us with shorter legs are sure going to appreciate it. It's a feature that some of us that don't have problems reaching the ground don't really need. But again, in that luxury category, helping make sure that your inner leg curve isn't pressed unnecessarily in those parking moments, you might like that feature of lowering the bike for you, and then it automatically rises again once you drive away and starts to level out the bike for you. And all that amounts to a front and rear suspension travel of about 7.5 inches on this bike. You know, not as short and little suspension travel as some pure street bikes. This bike's going to allow you to go off-road, off-pavement, and go do some exploring. If you're a rider who appreciates having lots of ride modes and electronic options to play with on your motorcycle, well, Harley has given you a lot to work with here through a clear, large, very easy to read TFT display. You've got sport mode, road mode, rain mode, and off-road settings, and as well as some customizable options as well, so that you can choose exactly the right riding setup for the situation that you're encountering. You know, when I'm riding in sport mode, I can feel the engine is piped up, as powerful as it can be, and the suspension settings are there as well, with real tight compression and rebound, giving a very firm, responsive suspension setup. You switch it over to road mode and it tones things down a little bit more. It softens the engine braking, it softens the compression and rebound, so it's a little more comfortable for a simple road ride instead of trying to be so fierce and sporty. And of course, rain mode and things like that backs off the engine's potential a little bit and power so that you don't have slipping problems, and activating traction control as well. Their cornering enhancement features work together by measuring the position of the swing arm in relation to the throttle angle, throttle position, and your lean angle. And all these different systems working together again to help make sure you're riding in a safe and enjoyable position. The chassis on the Harley Pan America is actually a stressed member chassis, meaning that the engine is part of the structure that holds the entire chassis and the bike together. You know, in some cases that has been thought to be a non-reliable, non-durable solution to building a chassis for a motorcycle, but as time goes on and we see more and more manufacturers actually using the engine as part of the chassis, it seems to be holding up, and as long as you don't pound it too hard, it should hold up just fine for adventure riding. The fork angle is set at a 25-degree rake, which is pretty upright, pretty responsive and sporty handling when compared to, say, a Honda Africa Twin, which is a 27-degree rake, just to give you a sort of a point of reference there. Good responsiveness because of those upright fork positions, yet it's still very comfortable for long hauls. It's a 62.2-inch wheelbase, and the bike weighs about 559 pounds wet, fully fueled and ready to ride. And with its adjustable two-position seat height, you've got a 34.2 or 35.2 seat position, or with the adaptive ride height feature, you can actually lower this down to a 32.7-inch seat height, which is again excellent for have such a big bike with such a big powerful engine to be able to accommodate riders that have such inseams being able to reach the ground. That's a pretty low seat height again for such a big bike. This entire chassis and the bike are wrapped together in a crash bar system that comes on this bike, and as I can show you with a little bit of footage, they held up pretty well. I was doing a hill climb, got a little stuck because of some issues, hadn't been on that spot in a little while. As I was backing down, I just slipped a little bit and low-sided, kind of dropped the bike to the side. And so it wasn't a real serious high-speed crash or anything, it was really just sort of a drop. But yeah, we ended up with some scratches, but basically the crash bars did what they were supposed to in protecting the main part of the bike, the engine, the fairings, and things like that. The braking setup on the Pan America is excellent as well. Up front, you've got radially mounted monoblock 4-piston Brembo calipers wrapped around 320 millimeter twin discs, and then a 280 millimeter single disc in the back. Those radially mounted calipers are excellent for alignment with the disc, and altogether tied in with its anti-lock braking systems, got a lot of stopping power, excellent for a pretty big and heavy bike. The Pan America comes with tubeless wheels with spokes going outside of the bead, so in the case of the need to change a spoke out, it's actually very easy to change those without having to dismount the tire. And with a 19-inch front wheel and a 17 rear, It's a great combination, I think, for putting this right in the middle of all this range of capabilities you might want an adventure bike for. It's going to be great with that 19-inch front for handling some paved turns and twisties and situations where you want a lot of turning power and grip, but it's actually big enough then to handle some of the off-road riding. You know, you don't want a 17-inch front wheel for off-road if you can have a 19. It's going to roll over imperfections and rocks and ruts better than a smaller wheel. Some other great features that come with the Pan America Special and add to the list of pros that I like, well, first would be a tool-free adjustable windshield. So you can change the height of your windshield simply by gripping this switch and move it into one of 4 positions. Great for different riding speeds and different riding conditions throughout your riding day. As mentioned, it's got a 2-position adjustable seat, a multi-position rear brake pedal. So if you're going from sitting to standing or on or off-road riding positions and your leg angle changes, it's going to make it easier to make smooth, easy contact with that rear brake pedal and have the best of control. As mentioned, it comes with the crash bars and the skid plate and a center stand. Nice to see that coming on a bike straight out of the showroom. Some bikes don't come with a center stand anymore. The Daymaker's signature adaptive headlamp is going to be excellent for nighttime riding and lean angles and turns. As you're going through the turns and the twisties, these headlights are going to sort of lead you by working their way with the lean angle of the bike to give you the best visibility. The Pan America comes with hand wind deflectors, kind of like bark busters, not real rugged. They're not going to handle the heaviest of bashing that you might go through if you're hitting a tree or something like that, but it's something to keep some of the wind and rocks or whatever from hitting your hands as you're riding. Comes with heated grips, a great option. One of the first things that get cold for a lot of us is going to be our hands. So having that easily to switch on is a nice feature. Comes with a steering damper as well. It's going to help stabilize the bike for you, especially in deep sand or off-road conditions. And there's a tire pressure monitoring system as well. You can keep an eye on your tire pressure right there on the dashboard. So quite a list of pros there. Now on to the cons. So while the Pan America definitely qualifies as an adventure bike, I'll say that the first sort of soft con is that the suspension travel and ground clearance is a bit limited when compared to other options in the market. Well, that limiting does allow shorter riders that have shorter inseams to reach the ground and to be able to ride a bike this big, but it also means you're a little more limited in the types of terrain that you want to accomplish and conquer and ride over. Another con I'll mention, and it was actually mentioned as a pro before, would be that 13-to-1 compression ratio. Now, that is part of why they're able to get so much power, 150 horses out of this engine, but it also could be a factor in longevity of the engine's life. So 13-to-1 is pumped up pretty high in that combustion chamber. Other engines in this class of bike are more in the 11.5 to 12-to-1 ratio, and so this is getting up around Formula One type compression ratios. Again, might not mean that the engine is going to last real long, over 100,000 miles like some other engines with lower compression ratios would. Also, if you're ever going to travel into foreign countries or even just small towns and villages where the higher octane fuels are not available, you might have problems with dieseling. Now, Harley might have done well with the engine mapping and the ignition timing being able to advance and retard according to octane and optimizing and avoid dieseling. I have not tested it in low octane situations yet, but I hope that this also doesn't contribute to engine problems as the life of the engine gets a little bit older. In fact, it might be a little funny that this little topographical map that they included on the fuel tank only shows numbers like 300 and 700, and we don't know if they were talking about feet or meters or whatever the case is. Those are pretty low altitudes, and again, dieseling from a high compression engine and low octane and problems like that often occurs more at higher altitudes, and it's almost like with low small numbers like that, they never really intended for this bike to be ridden at high altitude. Again, they might have engine mapping and ignition sequences that work with all this, and it's going to be fine. We will find out and let you know. The position of the regulator rectifiers you'll see just down here behind the front wheel, sort of a tough position to put such high demand electronics right behind a front wheel like that. You know, riders who are going to ride in the winter time, maybe after salt has been put down in the winter and the spring months when a lot of grit and different chemicals and such are on the roads, having all of that spinning right up into a sensitive component like the regulator rectifier, yikes, I hope it's not an electronics problem for the Harley Pan America. And also the position of this rear master cylinder. Basically, it could have been hidden perhaps more, because if you are going to tip the bike over on its side, you know, that is a pretty exposed rear master cylinder just waiting for some damage. Again, as mentioned, is a stressed member chassis, which until we see a failure in it, there's no reason to be concerned. But again, just noting that in the past, motorcycles like the Honda CB500X, we've had customers actually break that engine block from over-pounding it a little too much. Sometimes a stressed member chassis, depending on the engine to hold the bike together, if pounded too hard, could be enough to crack it. Haven't seen it happen, and I hope it doesn't with the Harley, but just something to think about. And then one last thing would be the side stand. Now, it has not failed us yet because we're being very careful, but it is not a confidence-inspiring side stand. It's in sort of an awkward position to reach with your foot. You get used to it. It's a much more forward side stand than some other bikes have. And it seems to have some kind of a detent that they put in there, so it's not going to fold forward. But when you see that it doesn't really position itself forward on the bike, but stays rather vertical, it's a little nerve-wracking the first time you put that side stand down. So now the big question, is the Harley Davidson Pan America the right adventure bike for you? Well, let me turn it around and ask you a question. Do you want to ride the most rugged terrain out there? Maybe some of the terrain that your friends are riding on bikes with more suspension travel and ground clearance? Well, you can still maybe ride that same terrain. You're probably just gonna have to do it at a slightly slower pace because again, it's just a matter of geometry and physics that a bike with limited suspension travel and ground clearance, when compared to bikes that have more, it's going to be a little more limited. You might have to take it easy going over such terrain. On the flip side, do you want to keep up with your buddies on their sport touring machines and bikes with similar power to weight ratios? Well, you're probably going to do it. You're going to keep up with them on the paved twisties and the sweepers and all the power this Harley is putting out. You might surprise some of them how well and how fast you're riding. And then the fun part comes when you guys as a group come to a dirt road and everyone wants to try it out, but you know, the sport touring machines, maybe with 17-inch front wheels, are going to be falling back a little bit as you reach out ahead and you launch out in front of them, kicking the dust in their face or whatever kind of fun it is you want to have, because the Pan America is capable of that off-road, in the dirt, off-pavement riding. It's going to do it faster than a pure sport touring machine or a sport bike is going to do. And so you've got that fun advantage as well. So it's a bike that's kind of in the middle of all the range of possibilities for a big motorcycle. You can do the pavement well, you can do the dirt. You just got to know the bike and what your limitations are. And that's my summary of it. This is a great adventure bike, a luxurious adventure bike, a lot of fun to play with. Again, given all the systems, if you like those kinds of things, and that power and that engine and the way it handles and feels, anyone can have a blast with it. It's maybe not the most potent bike when it comes to the off-road situations, like I said, but if you know you're not going to do that, if you know you're going to stick on maybe basic flat gravel and simple fire roads and things like that, get it. It's a fun bike and you'll have a blast. It's comfortable for long riding days. It's fast and powerful when you want to hit the tight twisties and sweepers. And overall, I congratulate you, Harley, on making a great introduction into the adventure bike market. So as promised, my closing thoughts and my message or request to Harley. You know, the news of this bike, the Pan America, hitting the market back in 2018, I'll never forget. It actually struck me a little bit personally because I grew up there in the hometown, the birthplace of Harley Davidson. That's my hometown too, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And this is my request for you, Harley. You've made a great first introduction of your brand into the adventure riding scene. Great job with the heavyweight. A lot of people are going to love this bike for what it is. Next up, I want you to make a middleweight. Get up there and compete against what Yamaha, Honda are doing. The other brands right now are a little bit ahead of you in terms of the middleweight. Maybe more specifically, Yamaha with the Tenere 700 and KTM with the 790 Adventure. You need to make a middleweight that's going to fit more riders out there in the market that are looking for that. We've been hearing this for years. Riders want that middleweight, and so the excitement the past couple years now of the Tenere 700 and the KTM 790 has really drawn attention to that middleweight category. But you're not going to be able to do this, at least I don't think, with the V-twin. You got to get away from that. I can't claim to know all the different sizes and exterior dimensions of V-twins when compared to parallel uprights, but I really believe that you're going to have to make a parallel twin upright engine to fit into a middleweight adventure bike and compete in this category. When you make this bike, you can't go higher in the seat height than, again, like the Yamaha and the KTM 790 are already at. You need to keep that in mind, because with a middleweight bike, you have to have a middle size that's going to accommodate the leg length and the height of certain riders that want and need that middleweight bike. So we've seen that parallel upright twins can be made. They can be made very successfully, reliably, powerfully, efficiently. And I think that's the next move for Harley Davidson. So great job in the heavyweight category. You're right there on the stage, and a lot of people are going to love your Pan America. But next up, I want to see what you do in the middleweight category. Make it with enough suspension travel and ground clearance to really be a fun, multi-terrain, off-road capable bike, and you're gonna win. Let's see you do it. Make it reliable too. You gotta hang out with the big 4 Japanese brands, Yamaha, Suzuki, Kawasaki, Honda. You gotta get yourself up there, make yourself known. This is the future. So what do you guys think? I mean, my hope for Harley being successful in the future is undoubtable. It's my hometown pride. I love the people and I want to see Harley succeed. But was I right in saying that the next step is definitely to further insert yourself into the middleweight market? I think you got to do it, Harley. I know you can do it. Let us know. Do you guys agree in the comments below? Let us know. Let's push Harley to actually do this thing. We want another great middleweight bike in the adventure bike market. So thanks for watching, everyone. Be sure to let YouTube know that you want to see more of our videos by hitting the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button as well. You gotta tell YouTube that you want to see more of these videos, and we'll keep making them that way. So thanks for watching, everyone. Ride on. We'll see you out there. I mean, could this be a better looking bike? I guess so. Thanks, Kylie.